Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent Dummy podcast. Today, we are meeting with Stephanie Flanders Martin. Stephanie is the founder and owner of Tree of Life Yoga Studio, a small boutique studio hosting virtual classes, pop-ups, and retreats. Stephanie has been in the health and wellness field for the past 7 years after a 30-plus year career in the restaurant industry. She designs and facilitates corporate wellness programs and holds her 200-hour yoga certification from Full Circle Yoga and her 500-hour certification with Yoga Medicine, where she is a yoga medicine therapeutic specialist. Stephanie, thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Awesome. All right. So we'll start with the typical two. The first of the typical two, Stephanie, I'm curious, how do you conceptualize the term codependency?
I think of codependency as someone looking for approval from someone and having an unhealthy attachment to someone. Maybe that's, I currently have a friend that I see very codependent on her husband. And observing it from the outside is always a little easier than knowing it from your own perspective at times,
Right.
but definitely easier to see from the outside.
Curious, what about your friend's relationship with her husband makes you, how do you observe it being codependent?
Well, I think, what I see is that I almost feel like she's afraid to be alone. So she stays in this relationship and allows things to happen and unfold in, and to me, a very unhealthy way.
Right.
I don't see him talk kind to her sometimes. And, as a friend, right, you feel a little more protective and really tuned into observing that maybe more so than she would, because it becomes her backdrop or her natural, kind of her everyday thing. For
Right.
me watching it, her just staying in this really unhealthy relationship.
Right. I think as you're talking and providing observations on her, I think you're adding to your definition, right? So someone looking for approval from someone, an unhealthy attachment to someone. And I think a big piece of codependency is a fear of being alone, right? It's like, it's just such a core part of it. And then also, like, a big aspect of codependency is staying in unhealthy relationships. I just aired a solo cast, and I talked about how codependents tend to live in extremes. Either we stay or we go. We say yes or we say no. We're either in or we're out. And most often we stay, we say yes, and we're in.
Yeah, we're so loyal to the detriment of ourselves.
Yeah, and one of the things too I see in her is she's had a failed marriage.
Mm.
And so I feel like she feels like this will be another failure if she doesn't stay there.
Mm.
So staying attached and in this relationship because of fear of other people's perception of her, or maybe other people don't see what I see because I'm very close to her. So I think that's another piece of it too, right? Just this fear of perception of what others might think of me if I make this choice or decision or move or whatever.
Totally.
And I would say that would be my experience as well. So I came from a failed marriage.
Mm.
I chose to leave an unhealthy marriage. And in that 16 years, I think we've all been through navigated, right, unhealthy situations. But what I started to notice was more and more stringing together of moments of unhealthy. Instead of, just on occasion, I'd be like, oh, that didn't feel right. Pretty soon it became that felt like the norm.
Wow.
And then I just had to make the decision, either I'm going to stay in this place of feeling sad, unhappy, uncomfortable, miserable, attached to this person that I have almost this identity with, right? I am the wife, right? And
Right.
or I make the choice to detach, which was uncomfortable. And what will people think of me? What will my identity be? How will my children navigate this situation? So sometimes staying in a place of unhealthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But for a reason I felt was a good decision to, to not separate my family is definitely to me a feeling of codependency too.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if a memory or an experience comes to mind that really demonstrates you at like the height of your codependency in the marriage.
A specific situation or incident is what you're asking about. Well, I would say I would just do anything he said. So, he would basically say, right, so I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And I would do it because I wanted to make him happy or satisfied or whatever. So, he wanted me to clean the house a specific way. Well, it's not the way I would do it, but I did it because I felt that's what I did as part of the relationship.
Right.
So, vacuuming can be done many different ways, but his way of doing vacuuming was different. And I just, satisfied that by doing it the way he wanted me to. So I think that would be probably one of the things that, just the way he cleaned and organized the house was different. And then the expectation being that, and then staying, that's just becomes the routine and the habit and the behavior instead of what you're really about, or what makes you feel fed or satisfied.
Right. So just you're like, I did what he told me to do.
Right.
As a global, universal pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, with age, right, comes wisdom. And as I, separated from that relationship, did some amazing work on myself and with the therapist and in groups, and really got myself healthy, I was able to step back and see some of those things and those patterns and behaviors that I was immersed in that I wasn't able to see when I was in them. Or maybe they didn't quite feel right, but I stayed in them for, the kids or myself, or the desire to be married, or fear of being alone, or whatever the case was at the moment.
Right.
But with age comes wisdom and knowledge, right? And then really working on myself now in a very healthy marriage and relationship. And part of part of that work was my husband now coming from the same type of experience and us having those open, honest conversations up front. Like we both had, here's our experiences as we come together. What will we do to make sure we don't have those similar type experiences? And some of the things we really did was we did the 5 love languages. That was really important to us to understand our different styles of needs.
Wow.
And to be able to know that was very helpful. Interestingly enough, when we did the quiz separately and came together, we both had 2 love languages that were within a couple of points of each other, exactly the same.
Wow.
So it was personal touch and quality time. And as we had that first part of our relationship, knowing that when we were not quite feeling like we were gelling or just kind of out of sync, those were the 2 things we'd tap in with is, oh, we both have been really busy this week. We haven't had that time to connect.
Right.
Or we love to hold hands. We haven't been holding hands, or, like just honoring that knowledge that we were able to gain. The other one that really was important to us that became really helpful to create a healthy relationship was we read a book together called How to Fight Fair. We both came from very explosive partners. And in navigating coming together, how would we, if we had some kind of discourse or disagreement or whatever, so natural and normal, right, in any relationship, how would we navigate that? And the first thing that we chose to do was that we would just stop and be intentional and listen to our partner's question or concern, right?
Wow.
Like, what was it they were feeling, or where were they at in this moment? And that really helped us to become much more respectful and open and aware. And I feel has prevented us from becoming codependent, but instead to have much more of a normal relationship where we ebb and flow. We have different wants and needs, and we communicate those. And we're very intentional about our time together, and knowing that if we do feel out of balance, that's where we're kind of like, oh, we need to keep this in check. The other thing that we've really done is right out of, I think, the second year we were married, we chose to go to a marriage enrichment workshop every single year.
Wow.
And we would go to that with the intention of just getting more skills for ourselves. And we would sit there and people were in such, bad spaces, that it was interesting to observe how we were trying to be so much more proactive about staying away from this codependency and unhealthy relationship, and just staying in a place of, oh, we need to keep that in check, or, oh, that's a really good skill. We need to incorporate that into our communication and our lifestyle. And that has been very helpful up until COVID, which is a lot more difficult to find stuff now, but.
Right, but it's like going for your annual physical versus the ER. And so here you and your husband were, again, gaining knowledge, gaining wisdom from your first marriages. Right. Sounds like you did. You said you worked on yourself. You cultivated that knowledge. You cultivated that wisdom. And as a consequence, you've created, right? The word that came to mind was this beautifully interdependent marriage.
Right.
Right. And you said ebb and flow. We have different needs at different times. And overall, this commitment to maintaining that interdependency with help from books and workshops and conversations.
And just to know, honestly, if it gets out of check, at one point, we were like, you know what, we're both feeling not in a bad space. Let's keep it healthy. We went to see a therapist. To me, that was like, okay, we're in a place of knowledge seeking, of growth. Let's go. And we got some great skill sets. So it wasn't in a place, like you said, of an emergency room visit, right? We weren't like, oh no, this is a 911. It was, let's go for kind of this check-in point, this place of needing to feel fed and interdependent. So I think that's a really good term to put to it, because I think that's really where we are and where we've chosen to stay. And when we get out of balance, we know it right away now. We have those skills and that knowledge base where we can just keep those things in check.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love you mentioning we weren't in a bad space, and yet we both agreed we were off. So we went to therapy. I have been in therapy since I was 20, pretty much. I'm also a therapist, so I'm completely biased to go to therapy. But yeah, I know therapists who don't go to therapy. And also, I'm making this point because when I first went to therapy, it was triage, right? It was I needed what equated to a therapeutic ER. And yet I have stayed. Things are completely different, but yeah, you do not have to be needing triage to go to therapy. You could just need your annual physical or a checkup, and you go. And again, like you find out things that will just make your health or your marriage better.
Right.
Yeah.
And both are equally important, right? When you get into a situation where you need it, you're there because you need it. When you're in a situation when you're just in preventative, right, then you garner different things at that moment. So I think those skill sets that you garner at those moments help you when you get into that triage situation and can navigate it with just more skills in your toolbox, right? I always think of having tools in my toolbox. What tools do I need to get right now that will help me be able to kind of dip into that toolbox at different times and get what I need.
Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, shifting the focus to your work as the founder, owner, teacher at Tree of Life Yoga Studio. I'm curious, Stephanie, how have you, in your own experience or the work, do you call them students, clients? Students. How have you seen the impact of codependency on their bodies when they come and work with you?
Well, I think so. I am trauma informed. I have a trauma informed certification.
What does that mean?
It's a specific way of teaching yoga more with words and cues than anything. So it's being aware of, for example, if I was to go in and teach a class in a high trauma situation where maybe it's women that have been in an abusive situation or whatever, it's me knowing triggers, words, phrases, ways to move around the room to keep them safe. There's different things you can do. Now I teach online, so it's a little bit different. But for me, just knowing the stories of my students and understanding how I can serve them in a way that I can use the words that can support them, more the cues that they might need. So I was giving the example to a friend of a client that I have, a student. She just went through breast cancer. And it was found on a normal mammogram, but it was a very aggressive form. And so they immediately move her right into this, kind of, we got to do this right now.
Wow.
And just knowing that, right, she shared with me, I haven't been here, here's why. Me being able to support her in more of a collaborative partnership, and having that knowledge, number one, but number two, knowing, okay, she has a chest port where she gets her chemo. I have to be careful how I cue different chest moves or arm movements so she stays safe. So while I'm teaching a class to more than just her, I may give a specific cue to support her in that if if your shoulder feels a little more tender today, be cautious how you move that shoulder, and maybe use this instead, right? Instead of turning the whole arm backwards, maybe it's bringing the palms to prayer pose where there's less pressure on the front shoulder. So it's really the awareness and the knowledge so that I can keep them in more of a space of working collaboratively with them, and creating a space for them to come as they are, and just hold a container for them, because that's what I really like to do. Every class I teach is a container for them. And when they come to that container or that time that we have together, we set an intention. So this month we have a monthly theme, and this month our theme is intention. So each class I start with, what's your intention for your practice today? And as you set that intention, be aware of how the body feels, maybe where the breath lands. Is your breath landing kind of right at the top of the chest now? Is the breath being able to draw right down to the belly? And maybe you adjust your intention knowing that's how the breath is landing today. So staying in a place of really tuning into what your body needs and being aware of that is been really important part of my practice, teaching from a screen instead of in person.
Wow. Trauma-informed yoga. And how do you incorporate that with your students who, may struggle with codependency?
Well, I think it's the verbs. It's the words that you use, right? It's the verbiage that you use and you teach in class. And so teaching them ways to tune into themselves, to be self-aware,
right,
to know how to make those adjustments, to know that if today their body doesn't feel quite right because of the way they feel, I am always a phone call away. So if something, at the end of practice didn't feel right, call me and let's talk about how I can help you with those adjustments or what might be needed in an individual class so that I can help them. So I think it's a lot of words to work on that codependence and knowing how to tune into themselves and really understand themselves better,
right.
and how their body moves, in space and time.
Right. And in your own experience or your work with your students, have you seen this imbalance in their relationships show up like in certain areas in their body? Are certain poses more difficult? Like any like connections you've observed between the two?
Yeah, I think when there's codependency, so I can go back to this friend of mine that practices with me. One of the things I notice is it's really hard for her to open her heart center. So where I might cue a pose of an open cactus where you broaden and open the shoulders to just open the heart center, and then open and draw the back of the body together in order to counterpose what we do when we work at our desks, kind of turned in. So
Right.
counterpose that's hard for her. And I think some of it's the protection and some of it's just her fear, right, of opening up.
Right.
And so just creating that space again that, today we're going to work on counterbalancing, bringing different words to it, right? We're going to work on that counterbalance of how we work at our desks. We roll the shoulders in and we shorten the pecs. We're going to work on counterbalancing that. So making it okay to open up the heart center because it's a counterbalance, and then her getting the benefits of that counter pose or that counterbalance. I think just using different words to help her with that.
Right. And tuning into themselves. That's a foreign concept for most codependents who are so in tune with others.
Right.
Yeah. And so you're even, right, just challenging that way of being. Choosing your words, right, with this trauma-informed yoga, but really helping them cultivate. I do remember this was kind of like it was a class, it was a yoga class, but it was part of a meditation. And I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but we had to focus on our heart chakra.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the depths of a codependent relationship. I just broken up with a former ex who that was really codependent at work, with my family, just this global universal codependency. And yeah, I remember we had to like get in touch with our heart and like try and feel if there's anything around our heart and try and open our heart. And my heart, it felt like it had like the shield of a knight around it. It was just like completely covered and closed off to everyone. And before that, I was like, my heart is open. I love everyone. I love the guy I'm dating. But in that moment, it was this clear sense that I am completely like cut off and closed off from my heart.
Yeah. One of my, I love that. I love so much that you said that. So thinking about that shield falling away when you really tune into it, one of my favorite things to have my students tune into is their breath. And think about the shape of the breath. Is your breath jagged as you inhale? Is it soft? Can you bring a softness around the breath? If you feel, is it square or is it round? Think about what shape the breath is. And when you can attach that shape to it, if it's square or it feels jagged, can you soften the edges? So thinking about how you can then, right, you might be coming to this with all of those things, but can you soften it just by using intentional awareness? It's kind of like what you did with the heart chakra. That intentional awareness helped everything fall away. But using the shape of the breath is also an interesting way to think about that same concept. And then not letting the breath just land right at the top, because we tend to be, as a society, very thoracic breathers. We breathe in that top 1/3 of our lungs. But when we can really draw and smooth that shape of the breath all the way down to the belly, it really, again, helps with a couple of things. Number one, it engages the vagus nerve, which is that nerve that runs down the back of the throat. And it also helps, the vagus nerve helps the parasympathetic system, so the rest and digest. Right. So if we're in this feeling of fight and flight or any type of heightened awareness, just focusing on that breath, the shape of the breath, drawing that breath down into the belly, and really bringing intentional awareness. The other interesting thing that you can do just to change that is humming. Humming engages the vagus nerve. So just even if you just did a soft, just a soft hum can help engage that.
Say more about humming. Other thoughts on humming?
Well, there's an actual, in yoga, there's an actual humming breath where you can inhale and then hum on the exhale. And just using that slow, intentional breath and that humming on the exhale will help that parasympathetic system engage a little more quickly. Now, it depends on how heightened you are, right? So I can't ever give a guarantee, but it's a tool, again, to put in your little toolbox of ways that you can use any kind of chanting, humming, our heavy breath where we breathe into the back of the throat, where you almost exhale and tickle the back of the throat. That's where that vagus nerve is almost like if you think about I always call it the Darth Vader, right, thing. So that how he used to really speak from the back of his throat, that's that breath that you're engaging that vagus nerve. And anything we can do to help that is really helpful for rest and digest.
Right. Now I'm just very conscious of my breath. So with the students who you have worked with, who yeah, maybe, maybe there's coming to yoga. Like I didn't go to yoga initially to combat my codependency. I didn't even know I was codependent. And I I am curious, right? This part of your definition was someone looking for approval. Have you experienced students really coming and seeking your approval, and how do you navigate that as their teacher?
Well, so it's hard to seek my approval the way I teach now because I'm teaching on screen. What I have seen is people looking around the room comparing when I was teaching in person and seeking the approval of others in the room. And yoga is about non-comparison and non-judgmental awareness.
Wow.
So I intentionally when I had an in-person studio, I would not allow mirrors in the studio. A lot of studios will have mirrors. I would not allow that. Now, the benefit of having them is to really work on body alignment, right? So if I'm getting into Warrior 2 and I really want to work on body alignment, looking in a mirror is helpful. However, I would argue tune into the alignment that's best for your body as you feel into the body.
Right.
So knee stacked over the ankle is important, but if it's slightly over, you're going to be okay, right? So shoulders dropped is more important. So as we come into Warrior 2 and we tend to keep our shoulders up by our ears, softening the shoulders and checking in with that alignment, maybe bringing the palms into prayer pose as we exhale, maybe moving the legs a different way. So just really tuning into more of how you feel inside your body than how you look in a mirror, to me, is releasing that need for approval or that need for perfection, because to me, yoga is never about perfection. Yoga is a practice. It is not a perfected, it's not about perfection. It's about a practice. And every day, and I still tell my students this every day, however you come to your mat today is how you're coming to your mat. There are days, even as a yoga teacher, where I'll get into a certain pose and my body's not liking it. So I make little adjustments and I may say, hey, if this feels different to you today, try this or try this, right? If we're coming into tree pose and we're really working on balance and focused, intentional, tuning into the body and the alignment of the body, I might be able to stand perfect in tree pose on my right side today, but not on my left. I can't even balance on my left. Whereas 2 days from now, I might come into the left. So I think that speaks a lot to that, not seeking perfection or approval, but seeking a way to just tune in and understand that today is a different day for my body. And today's a different day for where my body's at, is really what yoga is about.
Right. And what you also prioritize as a teacher, right? You're like, I didn't have mirrors. I know I love going to yoga, and I'm like, is everybody else? Oh, look, she's doing the cool handstand. I'm not doing the handstand. And but yeah, I just appreciate how, I'm hearing yoga as a practice, again, non-comparison, and you said non-judgmental. So in and of itself, it's combating codependent tendencies.
Correct.
In those codependent students, and also you really try and honor that in your practice or in your classes. I know I love to go to Zumba too. And it's like, sometimes there are certain classes I actually don't like to go to, because I'm like, everyone's there just is trying to impress the teacher. And I'm like, this is not, I don't like this vibe. And then there's the come as you are teachers. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, it can be a space where, one's codependency could just carry on in that environment. But yeah, here you are really trying to um, have them focus inward and on themselves.
Yeah, I think it's about creating that container where they can come as they are and not feeling like they have to impress somebody or live up to somebody else's standards. Like, I just love and appreciate you for who you are. I'm so happy that you're here today. What is your intention for your practice? And, just letting them set that intention. And I even give them cues, like maybe your intention today is focus on that's breath to movement.
Right.
Maybe your intention today is work on shoulder alignment. So then tune into all my shoulder cues, right? Maybe your intention is this, but to really take away that need to be dependent on a specific thing, but to let them make that decision for that day, for that moment, for that practice, what's important to them. And that could be different and could ebb and flow every single class.
Right. Yeah. So this is leading into the next question. How have you seen yoga help your students transform their poor relationships? Maybe, poor relationship patterns or poor relationship with themselves as a consequence of attending yoga?
Well, I think so. Again, right, yoga comes back to it's a practice, not perfection, and helping them understand that with more practice will come more improvement. So I have a couple of clients that have practiced with me since I started teaching 5 going on 6 years ago, right? So they move through their practice with ease, but they practice with me 5 days a week. I have some clients that come and this friend that I was referring to, the codependency one, she comes and she'll say, "Oh man, she's got the mobility of a monkey. She can move all over the place." And I said, it's important for you to come and practice with where you're at today. Where would you like to work today? Like, not to try to take away that comparison, but just to focus back on her and her specific need. Like, what I try to really quickly take her off of that thought pattern and get her onto herself. Because what is it you need today? And when I really have that conversation, one of the things I heard her say was, and at one specific class was, my hips are so tight from sitting so much. And I'm like, great, we're going to do a hip class today anyway. Really tune into what feels good so that you could take that home and practice that, right? So getting in this place away from this comparison or this need to be dependent on, I have to be the same as everybody else in the class, or, that just that need is, to me, is really important. And I can do that through helping them just kind of adjust their thoughts. Or encourage them.
Right. So emphasizing the fact that it's a practice about improvement. Getting away from comparison. And I'm curious, like, have any of your students, similar to my experience, like had some wisdom or awareness spark during a class, and then they're like, oh man, I need to work on this.
Yeah.
Right.
I had that in my class this morning, actually. So we actually did a hip class this morning where we moved pretty deep into the hips, and we started with some gentle movement and then really deepened in, and you used blocks to sink more into the hips, and then used a couple of poses where we drew the toes up, which comes into the back of the leg. So it moves the actual hip socket a little differently. And at the end of the class, one of my students said, I didn't realize how much I needed that until I was working through that left side.
Right.
And so I think when you can offer them ways to tune into that and to make those adjustments, she said, I really needed that. I think, and sometimes they'll even say, can you repeat that class? And we'll just do that class the next day or a couple of days later, or I record all of my classes so my students have access to them, depending on their membership. But So she, she said, oh, I'll go back to that class. Right.
Wow.
That really, I noticed that shift.
Right.
So I think it's, if you can teach them to tune into that whole body awareness,
Right.
that's what helps to make those shifts. And if you notice, right, like today, this is what my shoulder needed, or my elbow needed, or my knee needed, or my knee really hurt when I did that. Oh, that's interesting. So I always teach them to instead of staying in this place of, oh, why did that happen? Right. Stay in a place of curiosity. Because when you're curious about how something happens, you can really let that speak to itself. So, gosh, my knee felt funny. Isn't that interesting? I'm really curious about why that did that. I'm going to go back and maybe stretch it a little bit more, or do something a little different next time, or maybe I should make an adjustment, or maybe I should speak to my teacher about that. So I think it's not, again, right? So I think in-person classes, it's easier to stay in this place of comparison and, oh, she's doing that better, or how come I'm not good enough, or whatever. But on screen, it's easier to tune into yourself, and internalize like what's really happening in my body. And I think that carries over in life too, right? So as I'm moving through my day, at the end of my practice, I typically would end a practice by saying, today, may you feel joy, and may may happiness unfold through the day. And so for them to have those cues as to when those moments might unfold, or after a class, if the shoulder felt a little better, how could I go through at lunchtime and do some of the moves that I learned during class today? Right. So I think carrying that forward into everyday life is helpful as well.
Totally. Yeah. I know, I think I'm maybe repeating myself, but I remember initially I started going to yoga. I think there was a very popular teacher at our family's gym. And so I think I went when I was like 16, 17 years old, and my parents loved it, and me and my twin sister loved it. So thankfully started out my practice early. And I remember my two favorite poses. I loved baby pose. I loved feeling so tiny. And I think that had some things to do with, my relationship with my body, and, maybe, I was a child, so maybe I wasn't ready to be as responsible as I was at 16 in different areas of my life. Yeah, I liked being a little tiny baby. And then I loved warrior. I remember like the first time, I mean, I can't remember it vividly, but I just remember like going into the pose and just feeling like this warrior woman. Like I just felt so strong. And I think at times continuing my practice, sometimes taking break, but if you sit in some of these poses long enough, if you go to these classes with some consistency, it does really provide space and opportunity to get in touch with some needs that maybe you really wouldn't elsewhere. And so if I'm doing warrior and I'm actually feeling really weak in other areas in my life, like the hope is, and I think at times I was able to bring that energy to that space after the class or whatever. I was like, I need to go talk to him. And I do that. So it really, I just appreciate so much hearing your perspective as a teacher. And just being like really being reminded of what this type of movement can offer people, really on their healing journeys. Yeah. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's definitely a very healing practice, and it depending, one of my favorite, I don't know if you've ever done, but a very in a place where you can really contemplate and soften and release is restorative yoga. So just allowing you to really open up the body, and you sink in with props and into poses, and you hold them for 8 to 10 minutes. And with each of those poses, so if we were to do, for example, divine heart opener, it's it's a heart opening pose, and it allows the back of the body to be supported, the spine to be supported, and this whole body softening happens as you cue through this, right? And at the end of the 8 to 10 minutes, depending on what we're doing for that practice, gently moving into another pose then allows you to now soften for the next 6 to 8 minutes into something else. And to me, it allows this very reflective time, this time when I may open my heart and feel very vulnerable. Why am I feeling vulnerable? Is it because something specifically happened? I know coming into those type poses when I was going through my previous marriage was very difficult. I felt like I wanted to close down, like I needed to feel this, but the practice of yoga helped me to open and allow those moments of vulnerability. And when I was in those most vulnerable moments, knowing that's when I really needed the help. Like, I can't do this alone. I can't, this is not healthy. This is not, I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. I don't feel like in a place of where I feel is normal. Right. And so I think yoga can help in those ways too. It's just bringing awareness to moments and times when you need to connect with maybe a professional, maybe it's a friend to talk to, maybe it's a family member, and then garnering those healthy tools to continue on that journey if that's in a codependent relationship.
Right. Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Any other insights, reflections, observations on codependency and yoga?
No, I would say to me, the important thing with yoga is finding a teacher that you resonate with. There will be a different teacher for every person. Even for myself, I have a specific teacher that I'm very drawn to. I have a couple that I practice with, but I'm very particular about who I go to because I know how I feel. I know that I feel comfortable with their cues, their knowledge, their everything about the container they hold for me. So I would encourage people as part of your yoga journey to find the right teacher, and find the right teacher that can hold space and be a place or a container of vulnerability for you as well, right? So if you do feel, I had a student that came to class one day. This was right before I closed my studio. And she usually didn't do this, but she came and sat her mat up in the very back corner of the room, which was an interesting observation for me. And halfway through the class, I noticed her getting on her mat and just weeping. And the only thing I knew to do was to walk over to gently tap her and ask if she was okay. Is there anything she needs? And she said no. And I just walked away and I said, I'm here. And just being, as a yoga teacher, finding that place where if you need that release or that need to be, yoga is a practice about just being held on your mat too, right? It's a container for you as well. So finding that right teacher that will do that, because there are teachers that aren't that type of a nourishing teacher, and that's okay too. There's a yoga teacher for every person,
Right.
but just know to connect with the right person that feels best for you is really important, because they can help you navigate and get the tools you need, or get you to the people you need as a way to get the help you need as well.
Yeah. You sound like a beautiful teacher. Sounds like your classes are beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I feel like this has been a warm hug.
Thank you as well.
Yeah. Well, I know you do have an offering if this is resonating and the listeners would are interested in attending your class. Can you share about that?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we have what we call a 10 and Zen, Zen and 10, sorry, opportunity. They can go on and pick the membership that says Zen and 10 and get 10 days of free practice with us. They can attend all of our live classes. We still do live classes. I record them. If you have a specific membership, you have access to that vault of classes, but I would love for people to just come and practice with us and see what our community is about. We are a community. I call in yoga, we call it a sangha. Sangha means community. And we really try to be there for our community, whether the community needs support and love, or they're having a good day or bad day. We want to celebrate that. And be there for everybody as well. So we usually come a few minutes early and then start our practice and stay, a few minutes later, and just ask how people are doing, what they have as, part of their day. So instead of rushing off the screen, and some people have to, that's okay too. But so we have that opportunity. I have a couple of retreats coming up that if you'd like to plug into that, if you go to our website, treeoflifeyoga.studio, and you go to retreats, there's 2 different retreat tabs. There's a US retreats, where we have all 3 of our retreats this year posted. And there's a international retreat. We go 1 international retreat every year. And so we have that posted. We only have 4 spots left in that one, but the other ones are open. So if people would like to do that, we would love the opportunity to connect with people that way. And you're always welcome just to reach out and, just give us a call and see how we can support you on your yoga journey as well. And maybe that could mean referring you to a different yoga teacher. I don't know until I talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I appreciate you offering that. So yeah, we'll put a link to all of that in the show notes. And any other contact information or website's good?
A website, TOL, short for Tree of Life, Yoga Studio @gmail is our email address, and you're welcome to call that. And our phone number is on the website as well.
Okay, I will add that email. And thank you for coming on.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it, Marissa.
Mm-hmm. Okay, everyone, we'll see you next week.
Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram @therapywithmarissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy, and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please